All right. Kaylee, we all set? All right. Well, hello, everyone. I am so thrilled to have Kate Gilbert and Alison Croney Moses here with us today. It's very special for us to have these two Bostonians in LA as a gallery program that ran in Boston for 9 years, and now we're here. In a world that feels often like it's being turned upside down, these are two people who work every day to bring stability to their communities. So I think it's really wonderful to have them both in the room. Uh, Allison, this is her second solo show with our gallery. She's been a part of our program for 3 years now. She was born in North Carolina and has been a long-time Boston-based artist, working in wood and particularly in maple for this show. So it's the first. I'm sorry. Yes, miswrote that. Walnut, not maple, for this show, and it's the first time she's exclusively working in walnut for a single show. She received her BFA from the Rhode Island School of Design. And my favorite sentence about Allison from her bio is this: she strives to create situations and objects where people are compelled to interact, to express, and therefore challenge themselves to heal, stand taller, to build community, and to work towards a more just future. Kate Gilbert is an absolute force in the public art realm. I would go as far as to say she's firmly established Boston as a major player in the public art world. She is the founder of the Boston Public Art Triennial, which is happening for the first time this year. It's the city's first and only public art organization dedicated to supporting artists and communities in presenting bold contemporary public art that opens minds, conversations, and spaces, resulting in a more vibrant, open, and equitable region. Thank you both for being here. I'm going to get you mic'd up and you guys can get going.
Thank you. Perfect. All right. Well, we made it.
We made it. Thanks for having us.
I'm not adjusted to the time zone yet, but I hope you are.
Yeah, I am. This is good.
I think it's always helpful to sort of talk about how we know each other, and also just to understand who in the audience is here that might want to sort of have a different take on this conversation. I think I know many of you. But I always like to start off with this, like, what do you think public art is? And I know we're going to try and answer this question together. But I also just want to, I always love turning the script on you guys. What do you guys think public art is?
Art that the public can access.
Yeah. Any other things? Everyone's doing
art for everyone.
Yeah. So in the Uber, when I wasn't on my phone, I kept looking up and saying, like, oh my gosh, wow, the graffiti, it's mostly graffiti, the graph writing. I was just astonished. Like, that is for us. Those are messages that people are making for us. Whether or not we understand them implicitly as the artist made them, we have that moment and we bring to it our own lived experiences. So when I started this crazy thing of trying to bring more contemporary art into Boston, Boston is really innovative. Boston has great science, technologies, good sports. We also have really strong we also have really strong artists that just haven't had that opportunity. LA, you can go out there and there's so many walls here that you can just do that and be creative and expressive. In a city that was built on cow paths and brick, and we're so worried about preserving our history that it's hard to make that moment outside. So in defining public art, people are always asking me, how do you define public art? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, and then especially what is it and what is it not? Because I think we can have a picnic outside, and if people are coming freely and there's an exchange, why can't that be an art form too? So when it comes down to describing what the Boston Public Art Triennial thinks public art is, it's all about experience. And so it can be a mural, it can be street art, it can be a moment of sitting down in a sculpture. We'll get to preview your work a little bit. We're not going to tell you what your work is, but we're going to preview it a little bit. So that can be sculptures, installations, interventions, ephemeral encounters, but it's really responding to a site. So our former iteration of our name of the organization was Now and There. So temporary and site specific. Because I also feel like in a city as old and small as Boston, if we suddenly started putting all this permanent artwork around, it might get a little too crowded, and we need more space for artists to come in. So I'd love to sort of, I know this is like a tough question to just dive in. Do you have, as you were forming your first sort of entries into public art, do you have a definition that's starting to bubble up?
That's a good question. And I think everybody is aware that I'm part of the accelerator program, designing and building, fabricating my first public art piece in Charlestown that will open in May. And so I do get to work with Kate in this context. And I would say the accessible, I don't have a definition. And we had like a brief conversation in prep for this, and it's got me thinking where I'm like, I think about accessibility as in physical accessibility, and then who is likely to access artwork, but also who is the artwork designed for, like created for to access. And this is my first time kind of thinking about my work large scale, and kind of like I've had thoughts about public art, mainly whether it's calling neutral thoughts mostly, right? Like there's some like really like pop great ones, like great experiences where you think about, you remember it forever. There's like, I think it was a AIDS memorial that we saw in Provincetown that I think about. And then there's some that are like visually interesting that I won't forget. And then there's these moments where I'm like confused because architecture is also public art, and you're like, is that intended to be art? I think it is, you know. And then there's some things that are like, I don't really know what this is about. And so I think I'm coming at it without a strong sense of what I feel that public art is, but I recognize that I want my work, I want to play with scale, and I want it to be accessible. And I also want to be thoughtful on who it's, based on my experiences, who it's designed for, and recognizing that everyone will have access to it. Do you know what I mean? There's two things in one, where it might be designed for one person or a certain category of person, but it also needs to be able to be enjoyed by all.
Yes, yeah. I want to get to that, that question of audience.
Yeah.
I'll share that. Not too long ago, I read a book called Hitmakers, and this was how Hollywood producers will pitch projects, and they always sort of, you know, their new story, but they will always refer back to a story we all know. So it's like Jaws, but set in space, you know, and people go, oh yeah, I get it. And I think some of the most memorable public art is the thing you kind of get at first, and so the artist has done a good job of making it understandable or relatable, but then you go down deeper and you get the true narrative, and you get the true, oh, this is about, this is for, et cetera. So would you mind sharing who you think this work, either we can talk globally about your public artwork that you're producing with the accelerator, or your work here, who is it for?
So I think a lot about this. So this piece, the reason why we point out that it's all made out of walnut wood is being really intentional about producing sculptures that reflect my identity, specifically looking at my skin color and thinking about wanting walls, and white walls, gallery walls, museum walls, wanting the spaces to reflect in the medium that I work in my identity, that I haven't always felt that it has reflected, or it's been complicated in the way that it's reflected or represented. And so this is like, you know, abstracted wood, thinking of the richness of walnut, the manipulation of the material, thinking about vessels as human forms. What do we hold, and how do we support and hold community space for each other, grow little humans? All of those things are kind of wrapped up in these more small scale sculptures. And as I think about my work larger scale, I want it to relate to it, but not be the same. And so for this larger scale piece, I am thinking about Black women, Black women in Charlestown specifically. In Boston, I've been there for years. I've done work with Black mothers in Boston community, focusing a lot on, during the pandemic, we focused on processing our experiences over Zoom, then in person, and we did an art exhibit related to this. Then I expanded that and focused on joy for Black mothers, specifically thinking about Black girlhood. And this piece, I think, I'm hoping that my work is evolving. I'm trying to be intentional about like, how do I evolve as a maker and a creative, and how do I evolve in my community? And so getting this opportunity was it's a challenge. Mm-hmm. So it's an opportunity, yes. Mm-hmm. I was like, okay, accelerator program, I've never done public art. Yes, I would like to do that. And I want to be supported through that process. We're given the location in Charlestown, which I would say is not known for the Black folks that are there. It's a very white community, visually or like thought of in Boston. And it's also kind of on the edge of Boston. Mm-hmm. But the reality is like Black folks are there, immigrant communities, Black folks that have been there for multiple generations have been there, are there. And one of my challenges is, how do I bring this community aspect of my work and expand that network to the Charlestown area in an intentional, lasting way? So that's the community that's in my mind as I'm designing it. And I hope that some of the same feelings that we have when we look at like this space here, is called the Space As We Go, where you kind of want to be inside, but here you actually cannot be inside of it. I'm hoping that some of those feelings of being held and comforted, and playfulness with color and the curves show up larger scale, with the intention of calling the Black women in the neighborhood to have a space to gather, to interact with. So that's who it's intentionally designed for. But don't get me wrong, if Black folks are having community, then everyone will also be able to engage and build community. Because I think we need that probably now more than ever.
Amen.
So,
amen.
That was a long answer.
No,
but it's like you got to see the whole picture.
Yeah. In these works, I first came across your work in the Piano Factory gallery, that show that you were just talking about with other Black mothers. The title was
Unadulterated Black Joy.
Right.
Yep.
And there was a piece like this. You should know my father's a woodworker. He uses milk paint a lot, so I like recognize all the materials. Yeah. And as a former painter turned sculptor, I saw your work and I was like, oh, I get this. Yeah. So I'm curious about what is the expression? What is the moment when you're sort of pulling and leading you in this question?
Go ahead.
What's happening in this work, and what are the sort of bodily manifestations that either you're giving to it or it's sort of evoking?
Yeah. So.
Does that make sense?
It does. I'm going to answer it, and then if it doesn't, you're going to ask me another question. If I don't answer the right question. So in that show, Unadulterated Black Joy, I started to look at wood, and it was walnut at the time as well. So it was walnut and peeling off the top layer. And I had just gone through a surgery after growing two humans and leading them into this world and having to repair my body after that experience in order to tap back into my joy, like my physical joy. Yeah. And I've been like on this journey of like, how do I enjoy life physically again after your body has wonderfully been wrecked, you know? And so that was my first time being like, okay, wood as the body on the wall. I went from the suspended pieces back to traditional wall panels. Mm-hmm. Starting to manipulate it, bend it without laminations. These are all bent laminations, these pieces here, and using a bending iron and bending the form so that it can kind of capture this motion. Mm-hmm. And that series was all about that surgery and the repair from that surgery. And then for these two wall panels here, I took it further away from the individual person. Mm-hmm. and started thinking about community. Yeah. And community as in the family. So this one, and the titles of them, are not going to come to me. So you're going to have to reference that in their documentation. But
let's scroll across the bottom.
This one is really thinking about the cousins, the kids' cousins. Y'all, if y'all have cousins, y'all cousin time is cousin time. Y'all are crazy and wild and like fun, and sometimes parents are like, can we continue a little bit more? And then you're always trying to bust out of that. And that's kind of what I was thinking about as I was making this piece. And it's really about those kind of family relationships and less about the individual body. And I thought there was a lot of nuance to it, but the overarching was like I was getting into the weeds of how do I have a collaboration with the wood that's references or mimics what I find that happens in human relationships and bodies. And then this one's more about the family unit, like the two large pieces that are holding these smaller two pieces. And we're a family of four. This is very representative of a family of four. And just thinking about those relationships and like how long do these panels have to be to actually span that whole distance and cradle the other ones, and then they support each other and they're open on one side but support each other, and there's a lot of pressure there between the red and blue panels. And then the other two are much shorter and they do curl, and they also they might be supporting each other in there. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And so it's really thinking about the relationship piece. And so, you know, I think I answered the question, but I also, for this show, I thought about the collaboration of me with the wood as part of determining what the end product looks like. You know?
There's so much to unpack in there. I love the, for anyone who hasn't tried to bend wood, it's not easy. Like
it's a fight.
You have to get the temperature and the humidity right, and then you're holding and it's pushing back. And there's so much about relationships in there. I'll look at my husband. There's this push and pull, and we're supporting each other, and sometimes we're not, and
it breaks.
And
and then sometimes I repair them, and sometimes I have to throw them away. Which is when you're talking about relationships.
I know.
I'm like, ouch. I repair most of them.
But then I'm trying to like.
I don't mean to have my back to you.
The moment that we're in right now that we keep referring to obliquely is another one of these moments of pushing and pulling and breaking, and hopefully not too much. And I, more than ever feel like what we're doing with the triennial and what artists like you are doing is more than ever needed. And I know this is like a loaded thing right now, right? Because you're like, I'm just trying to, make my small humans human, right?
I'm just trying to make them human. In
this
world.
So we've talked about labor before. So just to sort of like backtrack to the accelerator program is a 6-month program or 5 months. I don't know, something. It's very fast.
Very short.
Very short. Too short. We got the message. And we support artists in how do you do budgets, permitting, insurance. We bring in curators. In this version, we had a site that you could respond to, and then we help, in this case, fabricate and produce the work. But there's, so I get to, jump in every once in a while in the really juicy conversations. And one of the ones I was in was in this idea of labor. And I don't know if you want to sort of go down that path in this conversation, but this work is.
When we were talking about our why statements? I don't even remember what I talked about in that meeting, other than I got really emotional in the meeting. And I think it was you really are. So in the context of this current political context is what you're bringing up. So this was probably in October. When was the election, y'all? In November. So it was before. It's a blur. I feel like we're all like whiplash in a blur. We don't know what happened when. But this was in October. We were like diving into why we're making the work we're making. And I think we all have different reasons of why. And I think I've come to my why after having my kids. Like I've always been an artist, but I've had a full-time job as an art administrator. And I think, artists often, there's two things in my mind that happen. You have a drive to make, like you can't live in the world without making. And you have a drive to like say something that might help change something. And those things relate for some people, maybe they don't for other people. And I have felt different parts of those at different times in my life. And the reason why I came back to making art as a this is now my full-time thing, is those two things coming together, right? Where I now physically want to be making constantly, rather than making programs at a nonprofit or an arts organization. And I feel like going through pregnancy, childbirth, through my experiences as a Black woman, gave me a different understanding of the labor that Black folks have gone through in building this country, and the absolute disrespect that society has given back. And I can say society, but really it's individuals that build a society, so we have to take responsibility of that. And this why statement was like all of this stuff coming out. And like my simple why statement that I started with was I knew I didn't do a good job of my homework. Like I wrote this statement because it felt like that was a heavy question of like, why am I making this art piece? Which I don't think in a 5-month period I really had the time to really unpack, like, why do I want to make public art? And part of me is like, well, I just want to make it to see if I can.
Yeah. That's
like part of that,
fine,
but also like what's bubbling behind is like, I have something to say, and I think public art might be a way to engage a larger audience. And it came out like I did like a C job on the homework, and Kate was like, but why? And kept asking these questions. And then I just like spewed this like, well, this is, I'm not going to curse, but like, this is really just not right. This is disgusting that Black folks and Black women could raise white babies and give of their own children generation after generation after generation. And here we are, and they don't get the respect and care. And I just want to raise awareness that like Black bodies are important. And if people can't see that, I don't really know what to do, but like I'd had some thoughts like before the election and before now, but now I'm just like, oh, I am browning out. I am restricting who's around me in order for me to really protect myself and care for myself to be able to live and thrive, because I deserve to thrive. I deserve joy. Black folks deserve joy, and we can't do it if we let everything else happen right now.
Amen.
Right? Like it's not our fight. Yep. Like that's actually the thing. It's not my fight.
Yeah.
We fought. We voted. Sorry. I just like went down this path, but it's true. And so we're just like, we have to care for ourselves. So that why statement, I honed it in.
Yeah.
But I also was just like, there's a lot there. It can't fit into 3 sentences.
Absolutely.
But it kind of locked in. I'll say this, that there was multiple things that were happening. That conversation, the experience working with my peer artists. There's 2 other artists in the accelerator program, but also I went to the Sojourner play at the Huntington Theater. And if you're not familiar with the Sojourner's play, and I'm going to say the playwright's name, I wrote it down. So Mfodiso Udafia is her name, and I'm hoping to get on a panel with her for the trial. But this playwright did an immigrant story coming from Nigeria, I believe. And the Huntington Theater, kudos to them, did a blackout performance where it was an invitation for folks from the African diaspora. And so you watched the play, and it was all Black folks in the audience. And it was like the type of therapy where you don't know you needed until you had it. And it was right in the height of, I think the election was right around the corner, or it was just happened, I don't know. And you walked out like a little bit more ready for the world after that. And she did she had a conversation afterwards and talked about it's a 9-part play. There's 9 plays. It's a cycle, like a 9-part cycle. And the Huntington Theater will go through all of them, but they're also traveling throughout I think a few cities. And so I thought about all of those things happening at the same time, and being like, why are these stories so important? And part of it is how you feel when you're in the spaces. And I hope that like the brownout experience, it's brown sculptures hanging in a white room, right? Like it, to me, I feel it and I get it. And I hope that it's like rejuvenating for everyone. And I hope Black folks come to the space.
We need them here.
You know,
I'm going to ask you at the end. We're getting towards the end. What else you need?
Sorry, I just talked so well.
No. This is all of it. We should share what this public art project is going to be. We don't have the visuals. You're getting a sneak peek. No one from the cast is here. But it is the brave space. I'm not going to say safe space because who knows what that means anymore. But it is. It feels to me like a natural extension of these near pieces. It's going to hold space.
It's going to hold space.
Give a sense of how I'm doing this. So there's a sort of like S shape on the ground.
Kaylee, how far from this wall to this wall? 20, what do we say?
25, yeah.
It could take up, it'll be close to taking up this space.
So this is monumental.
Is that 20?
And they'll,
at the widest point, it's close to 20, I think, 18.
And there'll be slats. Can you describe it a little bit? Or do you want to? Or you?
Are y'all going to come to Boston? May, and it'll be up until October or November.
May 22 through October 31.
Yes, you'll come. So I'll say this, because I don't want to like spoil it.
Great.
So it'll be a large space that you can walk around and inside of. I am playing with color because I think color in these pieces do represent joy to me. There'll be some openness to it. So that's an interesting thing that I think is developing as I do my first public art piece. There's an openness to these because they're small and you walk around them, and wanting to scale up and still have a closeness and an openness. So I'm going to try to achieve that. And I think I'm trying to distill down these curves to like the essence of what it should be. So simplifying rather than more complicated. So that's very abstract and vague, but I don't want to tell you what it's going to look like. And you'll probably get photos once it's up. So, yeah.
Does it have a name?
This Time for Joy.
Yeah.
I think that's what it's called.
Yeah, there's definitely joy in the title.
Yeah. The titles, y'all, I will remember it by the time it opens.
So the first press you have to talk to.
The feelings are in the pieces.
Our job as the organization producing this, our job as the organization bringing you and your amazing cohort through the accelerator is to do a little bit of that holding too.
Yep.
So, I know I've shared this with you, but for everyone else to hear, it is our job to also protect you in some of those spaces. And I know we talk about that with like the engineers. It's outside work. It's still very male dominated, mostly white guys. I've been in the job sites before and like, what are you doing, little lady? So in all of this work that we do, I always talk about our organization as being just like a little bit of water on the stone. There's a lot of permissions that are needed in the city.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that just say no first, even if just coming to a contemporary art experience.
Yep.
Never read the Boston Globe comment section. And so, I thank you for putting your trust in us. I thank you for going through this process, which I know is fast. And we talk about the labor of you as an artist and giving to the public. It's a whole other sort of type of gift that you're giving. So I want to thank you for doing this with us. And want to also, if you are interested, turn it over for questions.
Yeah, I think any questions, I'm open to it. I'm grateful to be part of the Triennial, the Accelerator program. I think taking away the permitting process and things like that is just really valuable for the first time doing it, because I've done it through working through an organization, but individually. And I do appreciate, I mean, Kate knows I like send the emails like, are y'all vetting all the fabricators and engineers so that I don't have to have, especially in this current political context, that I don't have to have really tense conversations with folks, because when there's a power dynamic of you're trying to get to hire someone, but you all like power dynamics they like cycle through in every moment. And so I've been appreciative of the response and wanting, hoping that all artists as they navigate this has folks that they can turn to in those situations. So I appreciate having this support. And I also feel like anytime I do a public art going forward, I'm gonna be calling, trying to be like, Kate, Leo, do you have a minute? Just because like it is valuable information that the organization now holds after doing this for so long in a city.
And you'll be part of it too. So then you can come join the alumni network, and we'll be like, well, let's talk to Alison. We've one of the first artists we ever worked with, Paul Ramirez Jonas, taught me early on that he only does a public art project every 3 years, because it is taxing, and it's a big project, it's a big lift. So I want to bring it back to, I think the original sort of title of this talk was about, Abigail, help us, collecting public art and private collecting. To do those big projects, which you don't make money on, let me just tell you, it takes this kind of work, the brownout, the people coming to see it, the very valuable curators and galleries that keep the lights on to help you. So in addition to buying your work and buying it in frequency and multiples, what else can we do to support you?
I think getting people in to the show. I think for this show in LA, getting Black folks here is a priority. I'm not here on the ground, so that's a priority. So reaching out to folks, inviting folks, so getting like kind of expanding out the network. I think I'll say this to like step it a little bit away, directly away from me, because it's always hard to ask for help, right? Like that is hard. But I think for artists, the things that I have found helpful over the years is, yes, folks coming to see the shows, sharing it with their networks, getting groups of people here, even if it's not about buying, they're about seeing and experiencing it. But also I've had curators email me, like a curator emailed me and said, hey, you should apply to the Loewe Foundation Craft Prize. And I was a finalist.
That's great.
Right? So like things like that. That has happened a couple of times where people, like I'll come to someone's mind and they don't hold that, they like share it. That's invaluable. And it also, like, you just realize that we are a network. We are a community of people. And so I try to do that for other artists and anyone, because I think we're all trying to live this life and make this hustle happen. So I think about those things. Those are the main, like if an opportunity shows up and someone comes to mind, make sure you tell them. And then make sure that you do the kind of time-consuming work to get people into the spaces that either don't know about it or don't necessarily think it's a space for them.
Yeah. Well said.
Those are the things. Yeah.
We have time for questions? You want to take questions?
I have a burning question.
Yeah, burning.
So I'm so interested in your feelings about and your observations about your art and white walls, and that galleries are white walls, right? White cubes.
Yeah.
And so to imagine other scenarios, like what other types of treatment of the walls, or what other types of spaces would you imagine you'd love to see your art in?
I have a question before I answer that. When I say white walls, because I said it a few times, did it feel like I was kind of dissing the white walls?
Yes. Well, I thought you were kind of making it about whiteness.
Yeah. So that's a good observation. I'm going to say, I say that I don't mean to diss the white walls. Because I think there's a lot of like, there's some debates about white walls and like the white cube and having the like artwork on the white wall. And the reason that I'm kind of coming to terms with the white walls is my studio is so dark and dense with things. It's busy, packed to the brim. And when I get to see it on the white wall, I'm like, oh, there it fully is. I don't think that's everyone's artwork or that's everyone's experience of the artwork, but I do actually want to see them in this space. And then I'm really excited to see where they go. So when y'all have sold a piece of work and you send me the photo, I love it. I love it because then I'm like, oh, that's in someone's like living room, and they have there's one piece that has a teal on the interior, and then their living room had teal in it, and it was like a brown. I can't remember exactly, but it was like a brown space. And I remember being like, oh, that I see why they selected that and put it there. And for me, like I am not wed. I'm no longer really wedded to my work. Like I love them, but I want them to find homes because other people can take care of them better than I can at this point. So there's an interesting thing there that I right now I like loved seeing this up. I was just like, oh my gosh, because it got out of the very busy shop space because it's a wood shop. Mm-hmm. Like people think about artist studios and there are these white walls where they have like all their inspiration and they have all this space. This is like a wood shop, And then I'm working on this large scale piece that or a large installation. And this is the first time that they were like, we can paint the walls whatever you want. What do you want it to be? And I'm like, ooh, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And I feel a little challenged by it. Anyway, I take forever to answer questions. That was a good question, though. Any other questions? Yeah.
Back to our conversation earlier, and I said accept all tensions. I
feel
like these white spaces are tension, but it's also a contrast.
Yeah.
My other comment is on how wood is foundational. So that's your why.
Yeah.
Wood is organic, so nature's going to do what it wants. And then it's foundational. I was thinking about when you're talking about using walnut, I was thinking about all the different tones in that color.
Yeah.
How, everybody has been relegated to this white color or this black color or brown.
But it's nuanced.
Again, that goes back to accepting all tension. Like,
yes.
Accept everything as is, right?
Yes.
And then go from there.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. Yeah. And even in calling it brown out, it's simplifying it to have a title, and I thought about that. And even you have the heartwood and the sapwood, it creates different colors in the pieces. And a lot of, as trained as a furniture maker, the light, I guess sapwood, the light strips on those pieces, you typically would cut that off in order to create like a walnut chair. You wouldn't build a chair with that piece in. But it's something that I grappled with. I remember in college grappling with that. And when I designed the chair that's in our living room, I was like, I'm going to keep it all in. And the professors were not stoked about that. And it does look like it has a totally different look than it would if it would totally the dark brown. But that, I think you're bringing up a good point, and I think it's one of the reasons why I've tried to continue to embrace that the pieces that you get from the lumber yard it's the tree. That is, we're all like this. We all got complexity to us. The things that make us perfect. That's what I'll say. And then these pieces, like these two wall panels, came off of there's pieces that came off of, there's like 12-foot long lengths of lumber for these wall panels that I had to use. And there's some pieces that are just so, the grain is so knotty or curly or bent that I can't bend it. It would split instantly. So I took those pieces and made these wall panels where it's really a collaboration with the grain, where I'm carving in the grain direction. to try to highlight that. And this is the first time I did it. I had fun, and I didn't want to throw out this wood that like some folks I think would throw it out. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, high end furniture, and that's what I'm trained as. Where I'm like, I want to have a collaboration that really does reflect our human bodies, like the symmetry, but not quite symmetry of our bodies, the collaboration with the grain itself, the thinking about like that bottom of piece. It's like, is that a pelvis? Like, what's going on there? So I think about all. Are those like spines? Are there two spines in that? Are these waterfalls? I don't know. But yeah, thanks. Any other questions?
I have a comment and then a question.
Yep.
To the question about the White Vault space and Alison having an exhibition, her very first solo show with us in Boston, which was your first solo show in a commercial space.
Yep.
The way she thought about the show, from my perspective, worked with a lot of artists, was entirely different from so many of our artists before. She didn't say, "Oh, it's 4 white walls." She looked up and said, "Oh, this is really beautiful ceiling." So the show was 10 pieces,
something like that, yeah.
At varying heights. So some of them really looked up to see, others walked around. There were works on the wall, but when people walked in, they almost didn't even view it. Yes, the walls were white, but they didn't really see it in that way. You almost reinvented it in this like floating gallery.
Because they weren't, that show I intentionally was like, I want to create an experience. And they weren't, there were some wall panels, but there was a large section where you were engaging in the middle of the space.
And we could have placed them on
pedestal. We could have done, yeah.
A little more traditional, but
yeah.
Alison was very good at taking a hard road, which I love. Kate was kind of like, that's
same
cloth.
Hard road.
Change this world. So I think that was a really good example. We have photos on our website from that. And my question for you, relating back to public art, so your piece that you're making is very large scale. Will you be using wood? Is it outside?
It's outside, and it will primarily be wood. Okay. It will be outside, and there will also be milk paint, is my hope. Okay. So, similar, yeah. And I'll say, just to go back to the wall question, I only got to walk through this space before I installed the show. So it's a different, like I got to go to that gallery. I went a few times to like be in the space and look around and think about it. And here I had a video you sent, photos, dimensions, a floor plan. I don't think we sent photos of the ceiling. Next time I'll probably ask for that. And then I came in, and I think that this is installed a little bit more traditionally, considering the sculptures I feel like are not super, like they're suspended from the ceiling, so not super traditional. But I've put them in the space where it's a little bit more traditional. And that's, I think, because I wasn't here to like live in the space before I designed it for it. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
So, and this is maybe for both you guys. So in Charlestown, do you know about like that actual site in terms of like any history about what went on in that site before, and has that informed the work? That's oftentimes a big part of a site-specific public.
Yeah. The organization has been working in that area for 2 years now. It's a partnership with the National Park Service. So we've been very intentional about looking through the history. Charlestown is, there's 3 rivers coming together there. There's a strong indigenous community presence that's been there forever. Then we look at the early industrialization that was happening. Maritime is a place of, we were making weapons there. Right? Then comes the Navy Yard being closed. A lot of people had meaningful jobs and income coming from that. The next sort of major wave of history is the busing incidents, or busing in general, and that's where the sort of generational sort of don't go to Charlestown if you're a person of color, especially if you're Black, it's just not hospitable. Started in 1968. Then to the current, it's now a site of great gentrification. There's a lot of, luxury condos nearby. So we've been, gathering all that history, working with the National Park Service on a lot of the data, and then sharing that with the artists. So that I hope you got all of that sort of walking in, eyes wide open. And then the artists were applying. It was also, the site was there for them to start thinking about. So there were some people who are kind of like, I don't know about Charlestown,
I know.
Believe me, when we first stepped there, we were like, but it's hard. It's a complicated. What was the phrase? Holding on to the tensions. Yeah.
Embrace the tensions. All tensions. Yeah. Yeah. So I've read through some of that kind of historical kind of overview of it. And I'm not in a mental or emotional space to dive into that. So what I did was I contacted any organization that I could find that works with Black mothers now in Charlestown. And so I've met with them a few times over Zoom, and we're planning some gatherings that won't happen on the site. It'll happen where they're comfortable meeting. And then the hope is that I've done this in the JP Rosendale area where I actually live, but the hope is that we'll meet a few times, build some community, see like what they even want to do. And it's not that I'm an outsider to that community, but there has been I've heard vocally from a few folks there, Black women there, they're saying we would gather, we would totally, if you help to facilitate, we would be there. And so even if 5 people come or if more people come, it's like trying to root us in what's happening now and what's needed now. And the hope is that there would be some interest when the piece is up, that they would come to the site and have like a dinner, a picnic, a potluck, a catered thing. I'm trying to figure that out. But it's like, how do you do public engagement? How do you do community engagement around art when you don't live in that place and in a way that's sustainable or has some lasting impact? Mm-hmm. So when I leave there, like this is a temporary collaboration. When I leave there, and I've told everyone at every step, I hope that some part of this community engagement or programming, public programming, would continue, but someone will need to take that on, and I will be there as a resource. And so I do that, like in JP and Rosendale, there are other moms that will plan gatherings that were kind of, the spark started when we did our first round of gatherings, and now they'll plan them and invite me to them. And so I hope that things like that continue, but we'll see,
And isn't that the role of the artist, though, to suggest a way forward, but not have to like keep doing that? You can say, this is a prototype. You can invite us to think differently. Yeah. And then it's up to us as individuals to continue that work, whether we're going and then creating new legislation or whether we're simply saying like, I'm going to keep having dinner with you guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
like we did our job.
Yeah.
We're still doing our job. Can you please do your job? Except for kinder than that. Yeah.
Okay. That's all the time we have. This is an
Great.
amazing conversation. Thank you both.
Thanks. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Kate.